Good afternoon, members. It is the appointed time and we have a quorum, so let me call the meeting of the security panel to order. Welcome. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes of previous meeting. The minutes have been sent out on the 29th of May. Can we now confirm that set of minutes, which is for the meeting on the 11th of April? Any proposed amendments? If not, the minutes are confirmed. Any objection? Okay, thank you. Item 2, information papers since the last meeting. There are 3 letters from Dennis KWOK and Alvin YEUNG, another one from James TO, and then the administration's response to issues raised in a letter dated the 28th of April from Mr. LAM Cheuk-ting, which is about the acceptance of sponsorship and donations by disciplined services staff associations. Please take note of these letters and then I will deal with them under item 3. Item 3 of the agenda, date of next meeting and items for discussion. Please refer to the list of outstanding items and items for discussion and follow up. Since I have received a few members' request to have a discussion or a meeting with the remand and custody in police stations. I hope to include this in our next meeting on the 4th of July. That is why we are going to have 3 items at that next meeting. The first one, detention and remand management of the police, and then the details of implementation proposed for the registered fire service engineer scheme, and also the nearshore and mountain search and rescue operations of the government flying service. I think the first one would receive the most attention. Let us take up those 3 items for the next meeting, all right? Okay, with regard to Mr. LAM Cheuk-ting's letter about the acceptance of donations and sponsorship by the police staff associations, and the police has clarified it has never received any large sum donation. But I can see that many members are concerned about the acceptance of donations by discipline services, and I would therefore propose to include this in the list of outstanding items for discussion. Mr. LAM Cheuk-ting. The reply from the administration clarified that it did not receive the $7 million donation. But I asked a written question at the Legislative Council recently, and it said that in the last 3 years, the biggest single donation was up to $15 million, and then there were another 2 amounting to $5 million each. I have concentrated on the police, but then there may be other discipline services, and I'd like to ask officials to discuss their policy for receiving donations. Okay, I will put this in the list of outstanding items for discussion, and we will not be discussing just one discipline services, but all discipline services in Hong Kong, because I understand that many discipline services do have staff associations and they also receive donations. We'll take that up as one item, all right? Okay, next, item 4, an update on the comprehensive review of the strategy of handling non-refoulement claims. Can we ask the clerk to invite the administration to come in now? Attending for this item, we have Mr. John Lee, Undersecretary for Security, Mr. Billy Wu, PAS for Security, Mr. Feng Ai-Wah, Assistant Director of Immigration, Mr. William Feng, Assistant Director of Immigration, Mr. Ma Chi-ming, Assistant Director of Immigration. I will ask the administration to walk us through the paper, and the floor will be open for members to ask questions. Since I expect many members to be asking questions today, I will assign only 4 minutes to each member, including a reply. I will now read out the names who have raised their hands. Jimmy Ng, Ronick Chan, UC Wing, Alvin YEUNG, Wilson Oh, Eunice Yong, and also Poon Shiu Ping. Anyone else? Okay, so many for the time being. Undersecretary, can you please walk us through the paper? Yes, Chairman. Thank you. Early last year, the administration comprehensively reviewed the strategy of handling non-refoulement claims, and we included 4 different aspects. Number 1, pre-arrival control. 2, screening procedures. C, detention. 4, enforcement and removal. All these will help us decrease the number of non-refoulement claims. With regard to pre-arrival control, we work together with provinces on the mainland in order to start dedicated action in order to crack down on illegal immigrants. We have achieved concrete results in the first quarter of 2017. Those intercepted in Hong Kong, and I'm talking about non-ethnic Chinese illegal immigrants, there have been a drop of 3/4 and a 50% drop as well for those making non-refoulement claims. We would like to continue this dedicated effort till the middle of 2019. At Shenzhen Bay and 3 other boundary crossing points, we are going to use the enhanced under-vehicle surveillance system in order to examine and also crack down on people who hide under vehicles. As for those countries where there are many such claims, we have started the pre-arrival registration for India this year. The system has been functioning smoothly. Those who are from India and who are overstaying have dropped by 60%. As for the screening procedures, when we decrease the number of applications, we also have to expedite the screening of pending claims. And the Immigration Department is now ready in order to enhance the capacity to 5,000 cases or more per year. The duty lawyer scheme now only provides 13 lawyers per day, or they actually handle 13 cases per day, but we would like them to handle 5,000 instead of 3,200 per year. We'd like to expedite the screening of the pending claims, so we are going to start the supplementary roster for qualified lawyers, and the eligible cases will be directly referred to the lawyers on this supplementary roster. They are having the same qualification as those on the DLS, and so the Immigration Department will be able to clear the backlog. We are going to take a review after 1 year. At the same time, we are going to review the immigration ordinance, and we have now got some initial thinking about doing this. First of all, we will look at the scope of the claims, and 2, deadline for making claims, and also the cap to lawyer fees. The details are in Annex C. If we have more detailed proposals, we'll introduce to LegCo. Our plan is to submit the amendment bill next year. As for detention, removal, and enforcement, on detention, in 2017-18, we have increased 35 posts in order to increase the capacity of Castle Peak Bay Immigration Center. We are also thinking of making use of correctional institutes in order to remand these claimants. We'll also crack down on illegal labor and the employers, and we will mount publicity. In order to have timely removal of rejected claimants, the Immigration Department has started to discuss the process with the countries of origin, and also how travel documents can be reissued so that they can be repatriated as soon as possible. Now I will be happy to take questions. Thank you. Since there are many who are going to ask questions, I will remind members there will be 4 minutes for each only, including a reply. That is also for officials who should give precise answers. Jimmy Ng. Footnote 12. The DLS has increased from 7 in 2009 to 72 now, a 10 times jump. But I can see that the number of cases referred has only jumped by 6.5 times every day, and that is from 2 to 13. In November last year, there was a document saying that there should be an increase of caseload for the DLS lawyers. But 8 months have gone by, and the latest paper only shows that the discussion is still going on. I'd like to ask this question. When will that discussion come to an end? Because you are increasing the number of lawyers, but that is not in direct proportion to the number of cases handled. Undersecretary. Thank you, Mr. Ng. The DLS has its own operating mode.
There is support staff, including court liaison officers, and right now we have 54, as well as 18 other posts. And in total, we have 72 officers. On the roster, there are about 500 people, officers per day providing legal service. Under the system, they can offer 13 lawyers per day, which comes to about 3,200 claims per year. We are discussing with the DLS on a possible increase in the number of lawyers. From our past experience, they would require support staff, or the 72 officers I mentioned, in order to maintain its work. The scope of work includes administrative work or background checks or filling in forms, etc. As we discuss the issue with the DLS in the past, very often we could only achieve something after a few months. And we feel that the DLS scheme can achieve the objectives set out under the scheme. So we would like to retain the DLS, and by introducing one extra lawyer, well, we will try to offer lawyer services to claimants for free. So there are 500 people on the current list. In other words, they are qualified and trained. So we want to make use of lawyers on the roster. We will set up a new administrative unit to take care of the paperwork, and they would support lawyers on the supplementary roster so that we can deal with more claims. We face 3 bottlenecks at the moment. First, the manpower of the Immigration Department. It has been reinforced from about 3,000 to 5,000, and for the appeals committee, and the number of staff has gone from 28 to 73. Apart from 13 lawyers daily, we also have a supplementary roster. Mr. Ronick Chen. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Jimmy Ng's question about screening capacity. According to paragraph 4, there are 8.7 thousand outstanding cases or claims, and we have new cases as well. According to paragraph 22, apart from lawyers, administrative staff also forms another bottleneck. If part of the service will be outsourced to external lawyers, there would be administrative work. So apart from lawyers, administrative staff would be another bottleneck. So would the government increase manpower on this front? Only 13 cases could be handled per day at the moment. Would it be due to the venue of work? Would that be another bottleneck that you have to overcome? In paragraph 30, more than 70% of the claimants are males, and more than 80% are aged 40 and below. So they could possibly contribute to Hong Kong. Can we ask them to take up voluntary work for Hong Kong, etc.? Under Secretary, thank you very much. As for the duty lawyer service, we do need a substantial number of support and administrative staff. As we discuss the issue with DLS, we would have to talk about the extra resources required, including court liaison officers or support staff. We are still under discussions, and while enhancing the support staff, we can also increase the number of duty lawyers every day. Offices or venue of work would be another type of resource. So this is something we will touch upon. But the supplementary roster approach is a new method, and we will offer a one-off legal fee to lawyers for them to, and they have to take care of all the relevant work, including administrative and support work, offices, etc. The purpose of the pilot scheme is to defer the administrative work to the lawyers themselves. That would be more efficient. They would have to estimate the amount of time they need to spend for each case. And the one-off legal fee we pay will cover the work required of the lawyers. And that way we would need less support staff, and the screening can be sped up. So that's why we decided to launch this pilot scheme. Mr. Chan asked whether the claimants can take up voluntary work in Hong Kong. First of all, they are the law doesn't allow them to take up paid work, and according to the court's judgments, they may not work in Hong Kong. As to whether they take up voluntary work, this is something we can think about. Mr. YEUNG. Thank you. For the pre-arrival registration requirement for Indian nationals implemented in January, according to the Undersecretary, the number of claimants have dropped substantially, but we also observed some negative impacts. According to the Hong Kong Tourism Board, from January to April, the number of visitors from India dropped from 147,000 to 113,000, and the drop was about 23%. The trade told me that the online registration system is a bit hard to accept. For example, only specific members of a family or a company are granted a visa, but not others. And the immigration department has been making life difficult for certain Indian nationals. And that's why we face a loss of visitors from India. And the number of tour groups to Hong Kong also dropped substantially by 30%. A lot of Indians visited our neighboring Macau or other countries instead. So even though this PAR approach has been effective, it might be going a bit over the top. So from what you observed in recent months, has the system be too stringent for those with clean backgrounds? Are you would you consider adjusting your strategy? Thank you very much. As for the actual enforcement of the PAR requirement, I would invite Mr. Ma, the Assistant Director of Immigration, to give us the details. In terms of policy, the PAR requirement is not about visas. And we can see that the success rate has been over 90%, and only 10% failed to register. Even those who failed to register might still come to Hong Kong via proper visa application procedures. But in terms of risk assessment, we realized that we would consider the applications on an individual basis. If multiple members of a company wish to come, we cannot assume that they are those individuals are of the same background. So certain members of a company could succeed, yet others could fail. And Indian nationals make up 22% of all non-refoulement claimants, and of visitors from India, 80% of the non-refoulement claimants are overstayers, so something needs to be done. For torture claimants or non-refoulement claimants from India, the numbers have dropped sharply, and now we only have about 13 persons per month. But before we introduced this system, we had 36 persons on average every month. Anything to add from Mr. Ma? Please be brief. Thank you very much for the question. In the past, some applicants who failed to register online resorted to visa application procedures, and their applications would be vetted within 4 weeks. And we would exercise discretion on those applications. And in some cases, we issued a visa within 1 or 2 days. The Undersecretary said that this arrangement has been effective, and we can see that the arrangement provides strikes a balance between providing convenience and safeguarding our security. And we have a letter from the Justice Center in paper CB-21560, and the letter said that last year the United Nations Committee Against Torture noted our procedures on handling claims, and the decisions of the appeals panel have not been open. So does the government plan to respond to this observation from the UN, and or whether there's any plan or timeline of action? Undersecretary, I would invite Mr. Billy Wu, the PAS, to take this question. Chairman, for the observations by UNCAT on the committee's request, we submitted a report at the end of last year to explain our procedures on facilitating claims by torture claimants. As for the disclosing the decisions of the appeals committee, well, we have set up a working group to follow up on the issue, and we are still awaiting final results. Would there be a specific timeline or time frame I believe that the appeals panel would, or the appeals board would not procrastinate on this issue, and they would give us a clear yes or no. When would the TCAB address the issue? We will ask the appeal board again, and we will relay these comments to the board.
I'll turn to another area. Para 29 of the paper. Near the end, it says that the Immigration Department has commenced a review on removal procedures, including discussion with governments of the major source countries to ensure timely removal. Can we please have more information? What are the deficiencies of the present system in the eyes of the Bureau, and how are you going ahead with the discussions with the relevant countries? Can I ask Mr. William Fong to answer? Thank you. Thank you for that question. When we execute removals, very often we don't see any valid documentation on them, so they cannot go back to their own countries. In certain countries, when identities are to be verified and when travel documents have to be issued, the time taken could go from 2 weeks to 6 months. On this issue, we have talked to the consulates of these countries in Hong Kong so as to expedite the preparation of documentation for these people who have to go back to their countries of origin. Pakistan and Vietnam have expedited the procedure, but the situation is still not satisfactory. We are actively discussing with them, hoping to expedite the preparation of travel documents. Just one word. The Bureau is telling us that they are handling the issue with the relevant countries. And you said that the process has been expedited, but you are trying to perfect it. Is that what you mean, Mr. Fong? Yes, that is what we are saying. Ms. Elizabeth Quat. Please switch on her microphone. Yes, thank you. The abuse of these non-refoulement claims is still very serious. There is a drop of 22% to 8,000. There is some progress and there is reason to celebrate, but I am still concerned about 3 aspects. I hope you will resolve them. Number 1, how you can further expedite screening in order to clear the backlog, and 2, the climbing crime rate of South Asians, and this is worsening Hong Kong's law and order situation, and 3, the work pressure of immigration staff and also lack of manpower at the center. Number 1, the DAB has always asked the administration to cap the time within which claims have to be made after arrival in Hong Kong, and also all the supporting documents should be supplied by a deadline after claims have been lodged, so that we can tackle the delays. We haven't got an answer. 2, a threat to our internal law and order. We know that the claims numbers have gone down, but then there are more people breaking the law and they are ganging up. And I'm talking about those with recognizance papers after laying a claim. I'd like to ask whether you can reject their claims immediately if they commit a serious crime. And 3, you can expedite the screening, but then there will be more work by way of detention and removal. And also, those people who have committed a crime and they would go to the detention center once they are released from prison. And the detention center is now quite crowded already. When can you increase its capacity? And according to the law, those people who work at the center do not have the same powers as prison staff. Will you, for example, consider amending the weapons ordinance so that immigration staff can also manage the detention centers effectively? Say they should receive training using a gun, or else they would not be able to execute their work. Undersecretary. Thank you, Ms. Kwat. Ms. Kwat talked about the screening procedure, that once these claimants come to Hong Kong, what is the deadline within which they have to lay a claim, and that there should not be an indefinite time, and also can there be also a time cap for the processing of each claim in order to tackle the delays. As I said in the introduction, we are doing some legal research in this area. And what we are researching into is aligned with the point made by Ms. Kwat. We are looking at overseas experience, and also we are looking at what we should look out for if we go in this direction. If our legal research would give a satisfactory solution, the bill that we are going to table will also take care of these areas. Number 2, detention facilities. As I said in my opening remarks, we are looking at increasing detention facilities, say, for example, to use existing prisons or correctional institutes. And we are looking at the legal aspect for so doing. As for the powers of the immigration staff who are managing these centers, including the use of pistols, etc., whether we can empower them to do so. Again, this is part of our legal research. We are going in the same direction as Ms. Kwat proposed. We will actively consider making amendments in the law to effect these. As for law and order, indeed, recently, we could see that there is a climb in the crime rate of non-Chinese origin people in Hong Kong, especially with regard to those who hold reconnaissance papers. At the Serious Crime and Triad Bureau, we have set up a dedicated special group in order to look into the crime situation involving people of non-Chinese origin. A crimes superintendent will take part in the work, and we are looking at intelligence gathering, black spots, etc. But I must emphasize that the vast majority of NEC people in Hong Kong are law-abiding. We are targeting criminals only. We cannot say that all the people of non-Chinese origin are problematic, but the fact remains that there are more who are arrested, and the crimes they're involved in have drawn our attention. As for other non-ethnic Chinese people in Hong Kong, we intend to communicate with them so we have a better understanding between each other, and hopefully they can take part in more community affairs so there will be more harmony. But with regard to crimes, the police has an enhanced system to tackle this. Chairman, I hope the administration will not just do research but implement proposals. Ms. Eunice Yeung, I welcome the proposal to reduce the number of such claimants in Hong Kong, but I have 3 questions. You are now asking Indian nationals to pre-register online, and I'd like to ask whether there are fewer claims now from Indian nationals. And also, you say within 28 days, people have to lay a claim. And I'd like to ask whether you are counting from the date of arrival to the date of filing a claim. Number 3, the supplementary roster for duty lawyers. I'd like to know how many barristers and lawyers have signaled that they would be happy to join. Undersecretary, thank you. With regard to Indian nationals, we now request that they do pre-arrival registration online. As I was telling Mr. Yu, about 10% people fail to register, and they need to go through the established procedure to apply for a visa to come to Hong Kong. And as for claims cases, there are only 13 per month now from nationals from India, compared to the fourth quarter last year. The average number was 36 per month, and the drop is 60%. In other words, after the implementation of online pre-arrival registration in January 2017, there have been a 60% drop for nationals from India who come here and overstay. So we think the measure is effective. Secondly, setting a deadline for claimants to file a claim, or also putting a cap on the time for processing of claims. We are doing legal research into this. We understand the quicker we work, the better. But we are looking at overseas experience and also case precedents. Right now, we give them 4 weeks to fill out forms, but the two legal professional bodies are saying that there should be an increase of 3 weeks, and we find that acceptable. So now claimants have 7 weeks to fill out forms. Now, how are we going to compress the time, or whether we are going to do it? We are now researching into it. As to the counting of the number of days, should we start from the filing of claim or from the time of arrival? Again, we are going to deal with that in our legal research. I think that is a very valid question. Number 3, the supplementary roster, which is going to be a pilot. So there will be another choice outside the DLS. Number 1, we would invite the 500 registered lawyers in the DLS, but we understand that the Bar Association thinks that this approach is in conflict with their code of practice. So probably members of the Bar Association will not take part. As for the Law Society, they did not say that there will be a conflict with their code of practice, as the Bar Association said, but the Law Society has asked us to let them know more before they would give an opinion to their members. At this initial stage, the Law Society's message to us is that they hope lawyers will take part in the DLS. But as I was saying, we have to tackle this bottleneck. We very much like to launch this system, and our independent counsel is that this is in line with the principle of fairness, and it fits in with the high level of fairness stated by the court, and also there will not be any conflict of roles. Therefore, this will be a fair system. We had informal surveys with lawyers. They felt that this is a worthy scheme. But of course, they would ask the Law Society. But according to our independent counsel, we would like to launch the scheme ASAP. And we will act according to the advice of our independent counsel and issue letters of invitation to the professionals. Mr. Poon Chiu Ping. Thank you, Chairman. Cooperating with the mainland to crack down on illegal immigration, I think you have achieved certain results. Compared to 980 in the first quarter of last year, now there are 219. But as the Undersecretary said, you have already set up the enhanced under-vehicle surveillance system at the BCPs. I know that these illegal immigrants are coming in by land and by sea. I'd like you to tell me about these 219. How did they come into Hong Kong? And secondly, para 30 of the paper, you say that the Immigration Department has mounted 259 targeted operations against NEC illegal workers. In November, you told us that you arrested 254 employers last year, and in the first 4 months of 2017, after mounting the operations, did you arrest any local employers who engaged illegal immigrants? And also, you talk about the review of the ordinance. You mentioned penalties for illegal workers.
I'd like to know about the government's work, progress, and timeline on this front. As for the review of the immigration ordinance, you said you would look at the scope of the legislation and you would learn from other jurisdictions, and that you would have different arrangements on the application procedures. And according to the EU, for certain countries, expedite assessments would be given, and if they have no right of refuge, they would be extorted. So we have a lot of Indian immigrants, so would we learn from the EU to expedite the process? And I will try to answer this question before I delegate to Mr. Fung to talk about the figures. In some countries, including UK, they would have a list of safe countries of origin, and they would expedite claims from those countries. And there are certain controversies on this issue, so we are monitoring the result of such debates so that we can do a better job. We want to avoid litigations in the future. And there's something we can learn from every country. Apart from expediting claims from the safe countries of origin, and in terms of the execution, Mr. Fung, based on past intelligence and the intercepted unauthorized immigrants or illegal immigrants, 45% came by sea, and we would step up interception efforts with the mainland authorities. And for those who arrive by land, it's also around 45%. That's why we install the under-vehicle surveillance system. In terms of illegal workers, for the first 4 months of this year, we carried out 259 operations against non-ethnic Chinese workers, and we arrested 146 workers and 79 employers. And we are educating local employers not to employ illegal workers. 4 members are waiting to speak, and some of them, some members have just entered the room. Does anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Ray Chan. I'll draw the line here. Mr. Leung Chi-chung. Thank you. For non-refoulement claimants, And of the 8,000 claimants, around 4,000 are illegal immigrants and another 4,000 overstayers. So you are doing a good job on illegal immigrants. For overstayers, you did something on Indian nationals, and you would check their backgrounds to see if there's any risk of overstaying. And you certainly made an impact. There are a few major source countries, including Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Pakistan. When are you going to extend the approach to these countries? Thank you very much. Apart from India, for the major source countries, nationals from these countries would require a visa to visit Hong Kong. So we would assess the safety risks associated with these nationals. Even with a system in place, there would still be overstayers who file non-refoulement claims. That explains the 50-50 breakdown of overstayers and illegal immigrants. Most torture or non-refoulement claimants require visas, with the exception of India. That's why we put in place the PAR arrangement. Mr. Leung. For visas or the online registration system, you might not necessarily know which of them might overstay. Most people would not come alone. They might come with their relatives and friends, etc. So would you try to find out whether visitors who come in a group are related to each other? So perhaps Mr. Ma can talk about the visas. Thank you. When we vet visa applications, we would consider different factors. And those include the presence of proper travel documents, whether the applicant has a fixed job, the purpose of visit, etc. If they have relatives or friends in Hong Kong, that would be something we consider as well. If they overstay in Hong Kong and file non-refoulement claims, if you realize that the visitors are actually related, would they be considered to have lied? Mr. Ma, if the applicant has not mentioned that they have relatives at the time of application, well, it depends on the actual situation. It might not be a case of deceit or deception. If an individual conducts illegal acts in Hong Kong and that person has a sponsor, then we would vet future applications in a more stringent manner. Mr. Frankie Yek, thank you. First of all, I want to acknowledge the Security Bureau for their efforts, but the problem is still here. We have invested substantial resources on these so-called bogus claims, and in paragraph 30 of the paper, for the first 4 months of the year, 259 operations were conducted, in other words, 2 operations per day on average, against illegal workers. So this is something we have to tackle. You gave us figures on repatriations. Have you tried to identify the main reasons? And some of them might be on reconnaissance and become illegal workers. can you share the relevant figures with us? Would you review the ordinances so that you would no longer issue reconnaissance and these immigrants can no longer become illegal workers? If you take away this incentive, then less people might come. You have achieved results, but it's still a big problem, and this is unfair to the public. Undersecretary, thank you. In terms of detaining these non-refoulement claimants, we have explained this issue a number of times. Under the laws, we are allowed to detain illegal immigrants, but the courts will make a judgment. If we detain an individual for the purpose of considering the validity of their claim, then we can only detain that person for a reasonable time frame. That means the detention must be objectively reasonable. If we detain all individuals without considering their circumstances, then that might be in conflict with the judgment of the Court of Final Appeal. So the court only allows us to detain an individual for a reasonable time frame. That means under situations in which we feel that a case can be concluded quickly or within a month or two. If we are to adopt more stringent detention measures or procedures, we might go against the court's ruling. So is this something we can achieve by expanding the powers of the Director of Immigration? This is something we have to study. We cannot just detain a person just because he or she files a non-refoulement claim. This is against the court's ruling. That's why we have to stay with the same practice for a number of years. In terms of the incentive, they only consist 1% of the total number of cases. In most cases, people come to Hong Kong on financial incentives. Salaries in Hong Kong might be many folds of those in their home countries. Dr. Fernando Chang. Thank you. For NECIIs or for the drop in NECIIs and non-refoulement claimants, this is certainly positive news. If there are a lot of disasters or grievances elsewhere, the figures might change. We passed the laws to crack down on syndicates from 8 countries after the law is enacted. Can the government share with us figures on the number of prosecutions against those syndicates? As for the online pre-arrival registration system, it was tailor-made for Indian nationals, and the success rate is over 90% and 10% failed. So what were the reasons for those who failed? For visitors who are Indian nationals, the average staying time in Hong Kong dropped substantially. The number of visitors also dropped by 64%. So I do not know whether this is good news? Or have you actually affected Indian nationals who want to come to Hong Kong for business or other purposes? The government is considering legislative amendments on the immigration ordinance, and in Annex 3 for detention and enforcement, you said you would consider amending the powers of the Director of Immigration on the arrangement in closed camp. So apparently you agree with having closed camps.
That is why you propose to consider amending the ordinance so that the director will be empowered to do so. I'd like to clarify whether that is your intention. I have said clearly that I definitely object to this. Experience in other countries shows that this is against human rights and it is not effective. It is also expensive. Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Zhang. Asked that after we have included 8 countries in the list, whether there has been any good effect. Well, we have used the new law to bring prosecutions, and the ruling was effected in April, and in the end, the defendant was sent to prison for 5 years and 3 months. We believe that is a good enough deterrent. There are 2 other cases under the unauthorized entrance ordinance. They are pending, and they will be handled by the court in the latter half of the year. There is another one which is having a pretrial in the district court this month. The DOJ agreed that after trial and conviction, they will apply for enhanced penalty under the Organized and Serious Crime Bureau, and the penalty will be increased from 3 years to 14 years. We believe that will be a good enough deterrent. We are cooperating with mainland to crack down on these cases, and also this leads to a drop in illegal immigrant numbers, and we believe this ordinance helps us to also crack down on the so-called snakeheads or organizers of illegal immigrant arrivals. And talking about Indian nationals, we require them to go through this process, and of course it takes time, and as Mr. Cheung would know, the success rate is 90%. In other words, most people get registered online, and it is also easy for them to do it. Those who cannot do it will have to apply for a visa. I think we have struck a balance between risk and travel facilitation. We believe this simple measure can achieve the intended purpose of us. And also closed camp, is that a direction you are going to take? We have an open mind on this. We have heard Dr. Zhang's view. There are voices for and against closed camps. We know that clearly. Our consideration is, first, the situation in overseas countries and their experience, and whether there is anything worthy for our reference. As I said, Hong Kong courts have already ruled that if we are to detain a person, we can only detain him for a reasonable period of time, and we are very seriously doing legal research. In fact, under the immigration ordinance, the director can also detain a person. How can we strike a balance here? We are trying to resolve this through our legal research. I hope you will not have an open attitude. You should say definitively that there would be no closed camps. Ms. Starry Lee. From the paper, I am happy to know that in this period, whether it is pending cases or other aspects, we have achieved progress. but the public have this perception. Those who have broken the law and have been arrested, there are more of these people who are NECIIs. And I'd like to verify this. If this is indeed the case, then our focus is not only to expedite interception or screening or removal, but we should in fact look at internal law and order. So my question is, first, I can't see any figures telling us about the commission of crimes by claimants. I understand that they don't only work as illegal labor. We understand that they have been involved and have been arrested for other serious crimes. I'd like to know whether this is indeed the case, that claimants are involved in other crimes and there is an increasing trend. Secondly, to tackle this situation, I think you should review the issue of recognizance papers and whether you are too lenient. They stay in Hong Kong for different reasons, and they may be tempted to break the law. So have you reviewed the practice of issuing recognizance papers? Overseas countries reject the claims once a claimant has been arrested and convicted. And number 3, community liaison. Have you increased liaison because of the rising trend? Thank you, Ms. Lee. First, a claimant with recognizance papers who has been arrested for a crime. In other words, they are not arrested just because they have entered Hong Kong. There were 1,506 such persons who were arrested. Compared to 2015, it is a rise of 35%. The trend has continued this year. About the crimes they have committed, they include theft, assault, wounding, drugs, and using of counterfeit notes and false documentation. And the more serious ones are possession of dangerous weapon, sexual crimes, and also robbery. About the third question by Ms. Lee, and that is liaison work. Overall speaking, the majority of people of non-Chinese origin abide by the law, and only like 1,500 break the law. The police tries to communicate with them as much as possible on the community level, so they integrate into society. Police districts do different things. They teach these people Chinese. They try to understand their culture. And also, we recruit them as ambassadors for the discipline services, so they integrate into the community. And so they live in harmony. What about the recognizance papers? Can I defer to the Immigration Department? Mr. Fong, please. Briefly, please. Mr. William Fong, thank you for the question. We have limited detention powers. We are only empowered to execute removal, but there is this ruling and directive from the court. If we can expect that we cannot implement removal, then we should not detain the person. Since this is a ruling by the court, if there are claims that cannot be processed, so we do not have a timetable for removal, we cannot detain the person, and we must issue a recognizance paper to the claimant. At present, if there is a decision made on a claim, these people will be detained at the Castle Peak Bay Immigration Center pending removal. Usually, we can effect removal within 2 weeks. This is the arrangement under the present legal framework. Chairman, a brief one. But there is a rising trend of people with reconnaissance papers breaking the law. I hope you will think of a way to deal with this. Mr. Ray Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the research into closed camps. This is one of the 4 scopes of review. In June last year, there was a question at Council about progress of research into closed camps, and I looked at that answer, and it's more or less the same one as given in Annex C, and that is you are doing legal research. And in fact, you have told us the constraints last year. In other words, you have already looked at the present legal framework. Unless there is an amendment to the law, it would be quite difficult for you to do it. And if that's the case, you should tell the public, and especially those who advocate closed camps, clearly. No one can prevent you from doing more legal research. We can have a discussion when you propose amendments to the law. Well, you can say you will continue with your research, and if there is a worsening of the situation, or if the situation gets out of control, then you will try to go for closed camps in order to tackle the situation. But the Undersecretary says he has an open attitude. Now, I'd like to ask the question another way. If the situation gets out of control in future, I'm sure the people of Hong Kong would have a different view. But according to information and figures we have, as you said in the paper, your measures are bringing results. Now, if the situation doesn't change, and if there will be improvement, then shouldn't we not consider going for closed camps? And even if you can cross the legal hurdle. And the paper hasn't given us clear information. You have only said that there are 500 places at the Castle Peak Bay Immigration Center, and you are seeking to create 35 posts. But how many of these 500 places have been used to detain any CIIs? Can I please have more information? Undersecretary. Thank you, Chair. When we do legal research, indeed, we have to have policy considerations in mind, one of which is the number of claimants. We want to keep that low. The best is to reduce it to 0. From our experience in handling cases, many people do come because of economic incentives, meaning they want to work here. I believe this will stay for some time because they can earn more as illegal workers in Hong Kong than working in their countries of origin. To tackle this incentive, apart from targeting their illegal working in Hong Kong, now if we can reduce that economic incentive to the lowest, then we can try to study our policies to see how our legal system can allow us to do that. And because of that, we need to do legal research. The present immigration ordinance already empowers the director to do this, but the court ruling is that we can only detain a person for a reasonable period of time. Now, how can we reduce the economic incentive for any CIIs and at the same time follow and abide by the court rulings? Well, I must make that policy decision. When I make a decision and if it entails legal amendment, of course we have to write that provision. And as I said at the beginning, we intend to submit a bill next year. And how much would that bill contain? I can't tell you now because we are working at full steam. with regard to the research. But I cannot say no to this direction because we have seen that there are many cases which have come to Hong Kong because of economic incentives. And as I said, there are people supporting and objecting this direction. But as a bureau, we have to make a decision at a certain stage. I hope we can make that decision after legal research. In para 27, you mentioned the usage of the Castle Peak Bay Immigration Center. Well, just now a member said that there is a rising trend of people arrested and who are with reconnaissance papers. This is because they have broken the law.
If those persons are involved in illegal acts, they are likely to become possible detainees. So we are likely to introduce more manpower and facilities under the IMD to deal with this. Finally, a question from myself. Undersecretary, I see that the government has done a lot against illegal workers who are non-refoulement claimants. And according to news reports, these claimants are involved in a number of other criminal offenses, for example, those involving drugs and sexual offenses. Do you find such activities more and more syndicated and serious? In some countries, and for torture claimants who are involved in serious crimes, then their claims could be rejected. So is this possible in our jurisdiction? Thank you very much. For non-refoulement claimants who are arrested on suspicion of criminal offenses, the number has increased this year by about 30%. For those on reconnaissance who are arrested and suspected to be involved in triad activities, the trend is also rising. They are being manipulated and they are involved in more serious crimes. A working group has been set up to study the involvement of non-ethnic Chinese individuals, and we have stepped up intelligence gathering as well. For a non-refoulement claimant involved in a serious crime, can their claim be rejected? According to the CFA's judgment, no matter what that person is involved in, his or her right to be free of torture or any other kinds of inhumane treatment would be safeguarded. In other words, his or her claim must be processed to see whether it's valid. If the claim is valid, we cannot repatriate that person. In other words, we cannot reject the claims just because he or she is involved in serious crime. We have spent a long time on this issue, so it's time to move on to item number 5, preventing and tackling terrorist activities. Let's invite the administration in. Members who intend to speak, please raise your hands. For this item, again, we have Mr. John Lee, Undersecretary for Security, Ms. Iris Lee, PAS for Security, Mr. Nelson Chang, Assistant Commissioner of Police, and Ms. Winner Leung, Superintendent of Police Operations Wing. Undersecretary, when you're ready, please. Thank you. We have seen major terrorist activities around the world. Even though Hong Kong is still one of the safest areas in the world, we would remain vigilant. Today, we would set out the preparatory work and contingency measures in various aspects taken by the government to guard against and tackle terrorist activities. There is a three-level scale of the threat Hong Kong faces: high, moderate, and low. Right now, the terrorist threat level of Hong Kong remains moderate. In other words, there's a possibility of attack, but there's no specific intelligence suggesting that Hong Kong is likely to be a target. And there are four major elements of our counterterrorism strategy: prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. For prevention and preparedness, we would adopt an intelligence-led approach to prevent terrorist activities in Hong Kong. And we would ensure that our emergency and support service personnel are well prepared for response and recovery. Different action plans have been derived, and things are in order to facilitate recovery, restoration, and reconstruction if possible. We have set up a counterterrorism emergency coordination team, and action plans would be derived against different forms of attack. For example, bombs, hostage, or the lone wolf attack, or the use of knives or other weapons. The Hong Kong counterterrorism plan also covers attacks using chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear or CBRN agents. The police force is the main counterterrorism unit, and it's one of the operational priorities of the Commissioner of Police to set up CT efforts in 2017, and high-profile patrols have been conducted across the city, and if needed, intervention will be made by the frontline emergency units, PTU, Airport Security Unit, etc., and the Flying Tiger Squad might also be called to the scene. For other units such as the Police Negotiation, Cadre, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Bureau, and the Key Points and Search Division would also provide support. The government would carry out drills against terrorist attacks from time to time. A total of 259 CT and major incident contingency exercises have been conducted involving different departments and public organizations. The Fire Services Department and Government Flying Service would also take place in rescue and response operations. The Immigration Department and Customs and Excise Department will work at the boundary crossing points and inspect vehicles and individuals. In terms of the laws, the government is amending the UN Anti-Terrorism Measures Ordinance, or UNATMO, and enhance measures against terrorist acts and freeze terrorist properties, etc. This year, we conducted a public consultation with general support. In terms of counterterrorism, public education is crucial. Apart from publishing pamphlets on how to handle suspicious or emergency incidents, we also resorted to various platforms such as the mobile application Safeguard Hong Kong, the SB's website, the Hong Kong Police mobile application, YouTube and Facebook, as well as Instagram, to instill among the public safety knowledge and anti-crime awareness, therefore enhancing their alertness to major incidents. Myself and the police are happy to take questions, 4 minutes each, including question and answer. Please raise your hands if you wish to speak. First of all, Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you. In recent weeks, different places around the world were subject to terrorist attacks, and there have been a number of casualties. I'm very sad to learn about these news, and I would like to send my condolences to people and their families who are affected. A lot of people in Hong Kong told me that Hong Kong relies on an efficient police force to protect our assets and properties as well as lives. But in recent years, a number of incidents have been cause for concern. Some people encourage young people to stir up trouble online. Some even teach people how to make bombs and things like that. And recently there has been a proposal to create a new chief superintendent post, so hopefully more can be done. And at a recent incident at our pier, a bomb-like device was placed by a girl. So I have a question for the Undersecretary. We have a lot of troublemakers nowadays. Some have also put false claims on the number of people joining a protest. These might lead to an abuse of police or a unnecessary deployment of police power. So how can we improve on that? For the ocean terminal incident, we rely on Hawk's Eye to detect the case. A lot of people are against the installation of Hawk's Eye, and so a lot of people are actually concerned about how they could be protected. If we can come up with more ways to avoid crimes, surveillance is very important. With proper surveillance and prevention, then it would certainly be easier than trying to catch the criminals afterwards. So what measures do you have in place to reassure the public, Undersecretary? Thank you very much. As for the wasteful use of police power, we have relevant laws in place against false reports made to the police. And education is crucial because the police serves the public. If the police's time and resources are wasted, then that would affect our capability to serve the public. So public education is very important. So on appropriate occasions, for hoaxes involving the 999 hotline, we have conducted publicity and education. As for the installation of CCTVs against crime, there is certainly an impact, but on balancing order and privacy, hopefully we can have more discussions on this front. From an enforcement perspective, the more intelligence, the better. But there are public concerns on privacy as well, so hopefully there could be more discussion so that we can come up with a consensus in our society, and hopefully our policies would be accepted by the public. So I'd like to thank Mr. Lam's suggestion. Mr. Jiming, I think most members of the public would not doubt our discipline services, including the police. So in the face of terror activities, I'd like to know whether the public is vigilant. For the suspected bomb in Tsim Sha Tsui last month, after the area was sealed off, a lot of public and tourists still stood around and watched. I understand that the SB has posted guidelines online, but when I clicked inside, the majority were text. I think most people would not be so patient to read all the guidelines, so I've printed a copy here. So there are a lot of words. So has the government considered creating more interesting informational materials. For example, by putting up interactive games to educate the public on what to do. In paragraph 18 of the paper, you said the government departments would continue to identify more channels, for example, radio and TV. You might not want to stir up fear, but can you tell us more about these channels? Thank you very much. In terms of education, it should be reinforced, and I agree with the guidelines you mentioned. I have a copy of that as well. I agree that text is not enough.
We must allow the public to receive the message in a simple manner. The administration and the police will consider that. I thank you for your view. Actually, to do this kind of publicity, we have more or less the same approaches the member has said on police call, on Facebook, and also on Instagram. We do spread the message. Perhaps I can defer to Mr. Zhang to let you know more. As the Undersecretary said, the police have been helping the public to have an enhanced awareness towards sudden happenings. We have already mounted 19 posts on different social media so far this year, including YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. These posts introduce our different units and also the important infrastructure and also anti-terrorism drills. These posts aim at arousing the public's awareness of such serious incidents. But I agree with Mr. Ng. He is saying whether we can have interactive APIs and other publicity. In fact, my staff are actively considering how we can increase publicity for the public. Next, Mr. James To, Deputy Chairman. You don't have a question. Mr. Horace Chung. Thank you, Chairman. We used to think terrorist attacks would include the use of chemicals or radiation and such large-scale attacks. But as the Undersecretary said a moment ago, in Europe now, they go for this lone wolf kind of attack because it's low-cost, low-skilled. The recent incident was about knifing people and swerving a vehicle into pedestrians. I'd like to ask, with regard to this kind of lone wolf attack, has the SARG got prepared for that? And also in recent terrorism attacks in the UK police have been seen to issue warnings to the public saying that they should go for run, get shelter, and report policy. In other words, that the people should, in the first instance, run away from the scene, do not try to negotiate with the attackers or surrender. This is a kind of response for lone wolf attacks. I'd like to ask this Undersecretary whether the SARG and the police also recommend such kinds of public education to the public. Undersecretary. Thank you, Chair. I have also seen the recent API in the UK. It is very useful. Mr. Zhang, the Assistant Commissioner, also said that different approaches are used. And in fact, this is what we have in mind as well, so that within a short period of time, we'll be able to send out different messages. Say, for example, at the scene, people should not stay and watch. They should not be curious. They should not take photos. The important thing is to run because the risk is there and you don't know whether there will be more attacks. Actually, our publicity material is in the pamphlet on prevention and preparedness. But we want to make it more interesting so that people have a deeper impression. And we want to only show more pictures and graphics so people do not have to read texts. And to target new terrorism attacks, we used to have hijacking of planes and people, but now because of the lone wolf approach, we are targeting it in our training and publicity. Say, for example, the patrols now would be planned for high-risk places. In the past, we might concentrate on important infrastructure like a generating plant. But now we would import the new risk factors of the new approach and to see which places in Hong Kong might be the subject of such attacks, and we mount more patrol there. And secondly, what is our tactic to target this? This would include our equipment. Say, for example, if you have to intercept this lone wolf in the shortest period of time, you may have to run towards this attacker, but then many people would get injured. So can we intercept him and stop him at a long distance away? We are looking at our equipment in this respect, and also say if there is intelligence telling us that certain places would be susceptible to vehicle attack. Now, how can we make strategies in order to get prepared for such attacks? In other words, they will consider all new approaches in order to find the most effective way to stop the attack. And also in international exchange on anti-terrorism, we would also discuss new strategies. This is what the police is doing. Mr. Ronick Chan. Thank you, Chairman. 7 people died and 14 were injured at London Bridge this week, and also in the Turin Stadium in Italy. In Italy, 400 people were injured, thinking that there was a terror attack. I believe it is right for the police to target this. In Para 10, in the last 5 years, it is said that the police conducted a total of 259 counterterrorism and major incident contingency exercises, meaning about 50 per year. The paper also says it cooperates with the airport authority often, and this year there will be 15 such exercises with the MTRCL, but you only mention relevant units. Which are these units? Would they include city-related departments of the government? Number 2, the airport, the MTR are important carriers. But what about shipping companies and bus companies? Will you also invite them to join these exercises or drills so that the public will be alerted to the possible strategies? Undersecretary, thank you, Mr. Chan. For exercises and drills, there cannot be too many of such. We will continuously introduce units and organizations into these exercises. Mr. Chan mentioned a few. They will certainly be considered when we design future exercises. Like last year, we conducted a very major exercise, and it's called Wingate. We introduced that to the media at that time. We involved 40 bureaus, departments, and related trades. As Mr. Chan said, we included the airport and also sea transport. Because we targeted the Hong Kong waters, we were trying to intercept and target such terrorists using sea and land transport to transport weapons. at different stages and according to the different needs, and also what can be done by what organization. We would design such exercises involving them so we can work together and build experience. And I can defer to Mr. Chang to give you more details. Thank you, Mr. Chan. Mr. Chan talked about exercises with the MTRCL. In fact, the 15 actions were about CT and major incidents. The MTRCL is an important mass carrier, and it is possible that catastrophes and fires can happen on the MTR, and terrorist attacks can also happen on the MTR. So we involve the MTRCL, the fire service, ambulance, depots, and also the CT units in the police from time to time. These exercises are to test our ability in tackling major incidents and CT. And at the same time, we like to enhance the synergy and cooperation between the police and other units. Deputy Secretary, looking at the exercises this year, apart from government departments, we have involved the power companies, one dockyard, airlines, one school, and also water treatment works. Our exercise program involves different units and organizations as the need arises. Ms. Eunice Yeung. The terrorist threat level of Hong Kong remains moderate, meaning that there is a possibility of attack, but there is no specific intelligence suggesting that Hong Kong is likely to be a target. We should remain alert nevertheless. Many members have talked about this kind of lone wolf attack, and extremists publicize messages online, teaching people how to make bombs, etc. In Hong Kong, there are major events that are going to be held, including concerts and celebrations of the anniversary of our handover. I'd like to ask the administration, since there are so many CT attacks or terrorist attacks in the world, will you step up your patrols and also enhance your capabilities in order to counter any attack in Hong Kong during these major events? Undersecretary, thank you. What you said is exactly what the police and the government are asking to be included in our exercises. You mentioned the major incidents like concerts where there will be big crowds. In our city program, there is a group. When it was first established, it had the task of concentrating on infrastructure like a power plant. The group will discuss the security system with the owner, and also we would draw up a response plan together with them. But then now we have expanded it. Wherever we believe a place is of high risk or an activity which may be susceptible, say like Ms. Yeung said, if we believe an activity is high risk, then we'll talk to the organizer. And we will look at security and how it should be stepped up. We will make recommendations to it, including measures, facilities, equipment, and manpower. And the police will also work with them. Therefore, when the police is of the view that a certain activity is of a higher risk than others, then that mechanism would be triggered. Ms. Yeung is thinking of concerts. Well, because of the Manchester attack, we also include concerts, and that mechanism can be triggered. And we will usually design an entire program to tackle the risk. But on what criteria do you do the assessment of risk? would you initiate liaison with the organizers, or should the organizer liaise with the police? Thank you. It's a two-way traffic. If the organizer thinks that there is a risk, it would contact us, and it happened before. Say a certain unit operates a facility, and including a very important computer or data system, then it can liaise with the group, and if the group agrees with the assessment, then a series of security measures will be proposed so as to enhance its safety level. And the police also takes the initiative when we see a risk. Now, how do we do it?
Apart from these risk factors, we would also assess the global situation and the popular terror attacks in recent times, because these attacks would evolve, and we would make adjustments on the security arrangements. Mr. YEUNG, this is the 20th anniversary of Hong Kong's handover, and during the anniversary period, there would be a series of activities, and national leaders would also visit Hong Kong. During this period, would the police step up its CT work, including cybersecurity? And during this period, will the government impose any restrictions on certain persons entering Hong Kong? Would the government make any announcements? Or whether this would affect the image of Hong Kong? With regards to the July 1st celebrations, the police would be well prepared, and we will conduct proper risk assessments and derive relevant measures and contingency plans. We have started work a few months ago, and we have a two-tier system in place to coordinate and direct strategies. And we also have a multidisciplinary working group to design and consider different security measures. So based on the actual situation, we will conduct a risk assessment and come up with relevant security measures to make sure that the activities are safe. In terms of immigration control, for the immigration department, whether or not there are major activities, they would ensure that some individuals visiting Hong Kong would not lead to safety risks. For individuals who have been involved in terror activities overseas, they would be vetted by the immigration department in order to confirm their purposes of visiting, and the immigration department will play the role of gatekeeper to make sure that individuals are not related to terrorist activities. Apart from exchanging intelligence with different jurisdictions, they would also assess the risk levels by examining the relevant individuals. Members are waiting to speak, and I will extend the meeting by a maximum of 30 minutes. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I will draw the line. Mr. Hon James, Ray Chan, Hon Chao, Chen Ji-chun, Dr. Chen Chung-tai, I will draw the line here. Mr. Hon James. Thank you. We want to thank the efforts of the police force and the discipline services. Hong Kong is one of the safest cities in the world, as the Under Secretary said. We are at a moderate threat level at the moment. So there's a scale of 3 levels: high, moderate, and low. A moderate threat level means that there's a possibility of attack, but there's no specific intelligence suggesting that Hong Kong is likely to be a target. And how do you come up with this current level? And at the moderate level, do you have measures in place in terms of manpower, rescue, etc.? And an American singer held a concert in the UK, and the activity was subject to a terror attack, and this singer will come to Hong Kong in September. You talked about a CT group. So are you going to arrange security measures? So in terms of the threat level, when would you or how often would you review it? Undersecretary? For the 3-tier threat level, we are in line with most advanced economies around the world. The police took reference from places like USA and Australia. Every country would make adjustments based on their situations, but the principle is largely the same. We want the public to know clearly what each threat level stands for, so we must be clear and straightforward. So we are fairly much in line with other countries. For each threat level, well, different measures would be in place for different levels. But there is some flexibility. The measures we take will certainly be related to the threat level, but it would also depend on the actual incidents, the environment or context, the attacks involved, etc. So the actual deployment of manpower and resources would depend on the actual circumstances. And again, this is in line with other countries. So we have no formula dictating the amounts of manpower we will deploy, etc. It really depends on the target and context. You talked about a major concert coming up this September. As I said already, we have a counterterrorism emergency coordination team. It will coordinate different government departments in deriving plans. We have another group that works on key infrastructure or important activities. So for this event, I think this mechanism would be triggered. Thank you. Mr. Ray Chan. Thank you. In the face of terror attacks, Hong Kong is relatively safe city. Since we have no genuine experience against terror activities, there is a concern that the public might lack awareness. In the 1967 riot, it was indeed a terror attack, and more than 10 police officers died, including those working on explosives. So terror attacks are not actually that far away for Hong Kong. In terms of preparedness, I think drills are extremely important. The government said 259 drills have been conducted on CT and major incidents, most of them followed a predefined script. Can you actually compile these footage and create a video so that the public can feel what can actually happen on Nathan Road and in stadiums or sports grounds, etc. Apart from drills, I'm more concerned about evacuation, should it be needed. Are there ways to conduct such drills to cover, for example, an evacuation at the Hong Kong Stadium when Ariana comes to the Asia World Expo? And if should an evacuation be needed, we would not have relevant experience. So on the specific issue of evacuation, has the police looked at the possibility of drills? Thank you. Public education must indeed be enforced. I think it's not enough. In case of an incident, no one would have an idea of the gravity of the incident. Our reminder is to ask people to leave the site. I think this should be very basic and something the public should know. As to whether we can offer any footage from our drills, this is something we have done already on the police's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Footage has been posted, but we need to reinforce our efforts so that the public can, so that more members of the public can access such content. Mr. Chan also talked about the importance of evacuation, and I totally agree. In any major activity, evacuation is a critical element the police must consider. In case of evacuation, we need to communicate instructions clearly to people on site, and we must issue clear instructions in order to avoid any chaos, and we need enough manpower and we need to consider whether there are enough notices or instructions. So these are things the police must consider. I think publicity is very important to enhance public awareness on this. This way, the public will pay more attention to the messages we send out. On international matches at the Hong Kong Stadium or concerts at the Asia World Expo, will more be done. Thank you. As I said, for activities deemed to be high risk, we have a coordination team to design safety measures. So these would be considered. Mr. Hon Chau. Thank you. In paragraph 4 of the paper, in gauging Hong Kong's threat level to terror attack, there are 3 levels. Right now, Hong Kong is at the moderate level. In the past, has Hong Kong ever been deemed high or low? The Undersecretary said such threat levels are in place in other countries. So based on other countries' experience, would there be situations in which a country assessed as having a low threat level is still subject to attacks? as I recall, well, I don't have the records right now. We have remained at a moderate level for quite some time already. In other words, there is a possibility of attack, but there's no specific intelligence. As a whole, Hong Kong has not been at a high threat level, as I remember. But for certain activities or incidents, we have been at a high level. For example, earlier, the head of a particular state visited Hong Kong.
First, in regard to the situation in that country and also some activities the person himself was involved in, and also some reports saying that he was once a target of terrorism. That is why we accorded a high level of risk to that visit, and we carried out our activities accordingly. But overall speaking, Hong Kong has remained at the moderate level for a long time. And you asked whether there was a discrepancy between the assessment in a certain country and in the end there was an attack. Well, I cannot cite individual cases, but that risk always remains because the assessment is done on the basis of intelligence and what is happening in the area around us. How can we always gather as much intelligence as possible? Well, we can never be 100% correct. I think all polices and intelligence gathering people in the whole wide world would want to have a foolproof kind of exercise, but this is not possible. That is why we have the 4 strategies. Apart from prevention and combating terrorism, we also talk about recovery. And that is that the community should recover, be restored, and be reconstructed as much as possible so that people can return to their normal lives as quickly as possible. And that is why in our strategy, apart from prevention and preparedness, we also have recovery so as to reduce the harm or keep the harm at the lowest level. The whole wide world adopts a similar strategy. Mr. Charles Smock. Chairman, some members mentioned that in recent times the trend is for lone wolf attacks, which is low cost and which is without notice. The paper has not addressed this and how Hong Kong can get prepared to respond to such. I think we should add that in later. But we, of course, would want to prevent it from happening. I can see that you are looking particularly at activities or certain infrastructure. In other words, venue-based. And you told us that exercises can be carried out on the MTR, but this is mainly done by the MTR. And as you know, the lone wolf attacks can happen at any time, anywhere, and such exercises may not be very useful. Now, I like to say that actually, internationally, when we read the news, we know that they might target certain countries. And there is intelligence exchange. Well, I don't know how much you can divulge. Maybe there are things you cannot divulge, and I can understand it. But do we have a sharing of the intelligence? Because sometimes certain things are controversial. Say the UK said it shared intelligence with the US, which divulged it to the media, and the UK is saying that they would not share intelligence with the US anymore. But do we also have that kind of intelligence? And also, you know, vehicles are being used and these attacks can hurt many people. Can you do something about this in a targeted manner? And number 3, the public's awareness. You said you would step up publicity, but Under Secretary, it is not enough for you to say something here. I know that for major events, we only hear from the singer Leo Cool, and we have heard him for many years, and I don't think that is enough. And also the UK police, I think they have become wise only after the event, but they have said on Twitter that it should be run, hide, tell. I think this kind of short, sharp message can impress people and people can share it. So can you think of such slogans or even exercises involving the public, involving students? So we can all get better prepared. I know it may be difficult because you don't want to cause panic. Other people may not come forward because they might not think there is a risk. But how can you do better in general? Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mok made 3 points. I will respond to the last point first. I definitely agree that we should step up publicity and education. When I answered other members, I also said that I agree that we should work from different aspects and adopt different approaches and make it more interesting. And that our focus should be that it is short, sharp, and easy to remember, so that unfortunately when something does happen, people will recall the message easily. I definitely agree that we should be diversified in our approach, for example, using new media. I also agree that we can introduce public participation in certain exercises. Mr. Mok mentioned students. We consider that at this stage, when we design our drills and exercises, wherever possible, we are going to introduce those elements. But how can we do it in such a way that it will not cause panic or disturb the public? We have to consider more. And as for intelligence sharing, Hong Kong does not exist alone, so we must dovetail with the international community, for example, through Interpol. And also there is already point-to-point exchange with regard to CT intelligence. We have established mutual trust with other countries. In fact, in the past, we have assisted overseas intelligence units to tackle terrorism. That message was not targeted at Hong Kong, but we took part and we established mutual trust with other CT units. In fact, as Mr. Mok said, we have different considerations before intelligence exchange is done, but we would go for the biggest possibility of doing so. Ms. Claudia Mo, terrorism cannot be totally prevented because they now adopt the lone wolf approach. So we don't know what to prevent when. However, it seems Hong Kong people may feel too reassured. If something happens, people should remain calm and no one should scream. That is correct, but then people tend to take out their smartphones and take photographs. And if something really happens, that may not be desirable. And also, as we all know, if there is a big crowd, it doesn't have to be an explosive or a toxic gas, but then there can be stampeding. I'd like to ask the police. It seems you don't talk about that much. I wouldn't call it education because I don't want people to say you educate the public because the public do not need to be educated by you. But is it possible for you to exchange these messages more? Secondly, on July 1st, there will be a major celebration and state leaders are coming to Hong Kong. Can you tell the public what kind of security or CT measures are you going to adopt for July 1st? Under Secretary, Ms. Mo asked 2 questions. One, if there should be a terror attack, how can we share preventive or response measures? I will defer to the ACP, Mr. Jiang, to answer you. As for July 1st celebrations, I already explained when I answered other members. We will certainly act according to the prevailing situation. will look at the entire world, our community, and what kind of risks will affect us at a certain time. And so we would assess the risk accordingly and adopt security measures. The police will get prepared in every aspect, but we cannot divulge details. Well, of course, and I dare not, in fact, ask you for details, but I am just asking what are the emphases. I would say the Victoria Harbour, the airport, and the activity venues. And perhaps you might be more concerned about online activities. I just like that kind of answer, please. Undersecretary. Well, it really depends what activities will be held on a certain day, where they will be held. Well, you have the entire timetable, right? Why don't you allow the Undersecretary to answer first? Maybe, Ms. Mo, you know more than me. But as far as I understand, we still need to look at the actual situation, where the activities will be held, when they will be held, who will be involved, and assess the risk before we would formulate a strategy. As for the risk awareness, I defer to Mr. Zhang. Chairman, I agree totally with Ms. Mo that we need to step up public education, as some other members have also suggested. This year, as we said, the police had posted at various times on social media. 3 of the posts were done in conjunction with the FSD, and they were about remaining calm when something happens. And we are telling the public that when there is a major incident, what the public should do and not do. As Ms. Mo was saying, people should not take out their smartphones to make photographs. They should evacuate and listen to the directions of police and other staff members on site. And wherever possible, they should report to the police for assistance. These posts have been issued on social media. I also agree with Ms. Mo that we'll continue to step up our efforts. Mr. LAM Cheuk-ting. Thank you, Chair. I heard Mr. YEUNG talk about persona non gratis and other people who should not be allowed entry into Hong Kong. I'd like to know how many such people there were up to this point this year. Do you have the number, Undersecretary? Thank you. Mr. Leung, we do not divulge this figure because it involves different aspects. No, I'm not talking about everybody denied entry into Hong Kong. I'm just asking whether you have the figures about such people. Well, go back and see whether we have that figure. Because neighboring places have made use of such grounds to deny entry by Hong Kongers, saying that they should not enter because of possible disturbance caused to that place. So maybe we should consider that in order to preserve local security. I also am aware that some members mentioned July 1st there will be concerts and soccer matches and other large-scale activities, and also state leaders are coming to Hong Kong. If our risk level is set at moderate, would that be appropriate for July 1st? Thank you. I'll go back and check immigration figures, but I know there are many restrictions, and there are also fixed categories. As for assessing the risk of different activities, why do we go for high, moderate, and low levels? When we design this 3-tier scale, all units felt that they should be simple and easy to understand. Well, I can give you finer levels. Remember, we used to have typhoon signals 1 to 10, and then 5 were deleted, and now our system has become much simpler. But Undersecretary, you use 4 factors to decide on the level. I think prevention is important. It includes intelligence and also critical infrastructures. Do you think moderate is already sufficient? But of course, we are going for prevention in the main because we don't know what will happen. Is it really sufficient?
Is prevention really adequate for the moderate level? Currently, we find this adequate. As I've said, a moderate threat level means there's a possibility of attack, but there's no specific intelligence suggesting that Hong Kong is likely to be a target. So there are 2 elements: the threat of a terror attack. When discussing terror attacks, the focus of Interpol is when there would be attacks, but not if. So we have to remain vigilant. There would be a perennial threat of a terror attack. There are 2 elements to a moderate level. First, there's a possibility of attack, as I said. And 2, whether there's specific intelligence pointing to an attack. If I ask people to be alert, then people would wonder whether they have to remain vigilant all the time. If there is intelligence of attack, then you would have specific measures. Well, there's a mechanism in place. You need more information before elevating the level. Can you explain this scale of 3 levels? When are you going to escalate from moderate to high? As we have explained, a high threat level means a possibility of attack, and there is specific intelligence pointing to an attack. For example, if I receive actual news on the actual time, dates of an attack, then I would elevate the threat level to high, and it will then be announced to the public. At a high level, the public might need to be prepared. But when conducting these assessments, we need to use our professional judgment and relevant tools. For example, for criminal offenses, if we suspect that gambling takes place in a venue, then we need to first observe and assess the reliability of the intelligence. And the police is vastly experienced. Over the years, we have put in a robust system. We would verify the intelligence and exchange information with different units. We will also gauge the reliability of the source. So we need to consider different factors before we can make an assessment. Relevant training and tools are required, and there would be mechanisms in place. And there would be ways to verify and examine the information. If the intelligence is deemed to be reliable, then we might consider elevating the threat level. Dr. Chen Hong-tai, can I have 7 minutes as well? Mr. Leung Chi-chung asked about the blacklist for immigration. It might be difficult to share that blacklist with LACHCO. So is there a system or a blacklist in place on immigration? This has nothing to do with our topic. those individuals might lead to disorder, and they might be linked to terror activities. Thank you very much. We do not have this immigration blacklist, but we have a watch list of immigration for those who might be terrorists. The difference between a blacklist and watch list is that those on the blacklist would be barred with no questions asked. And for those on the watch list, we would examine the individuals case by case. For example, for internationally recognized terrorists, they would not be allowed to enter. When including individuals on the watch list, would there be any standards or mechanisms? Could details be shared in writing after the meeting? I think this is a matter of interest for some members. I'd like to follow up on an earlier incident. On the 1st of May, the Civil Aviation Department said they were subject to unknown interference for 3 minutes, and the air traffic control system was disrupted. Would that be related to terrorism, and was that related to any drills and preparedness for terrorist attacks? There was such possibility. Some syndicates might make use of such disruption to hijack planes or jeopardize our safety. So what is the latest update on that incident? On the watch list, we can provide information after the meeting. But this is an international practice. If any individual is deemed to create risks, I think the US, UK, etc. are adopting similar measures. The 10-minute disruption the CAD suffered on the 1st of May. Can the police provide an update of what actually triggered the incident? Was it related to terrorism? As we understand, the Communications Authority is dealing with that incident. If anyone detects any disruptions in signals, they can lodge a complaint to the Communications Authority and they would follow up. The police had no role. A number of members requested the police to launch an investigation. This is not about a signal disruption to our mobile phones. It's about Hong Kong. So how can you say it had nothing to do with the Security Bureau? Nathan Law wrote a letter to the Secretary and the Office of the Communications Authority, and Dr. Chang should have a copy. If not, the Secretariat can share that letter with you again after the meeting. Do you have any follow-up issues on the topic discussed today? On the 1st of July, there would be similar considerations. If the government's well, on the 1st of May, it was a drill, as I understand. The police should review its practice. You cannot create a risk in the name of a counter-terrorism drill. I think this is simple logic. So, Undersecretary, please take note of Dr. Chang's comment. Anything in response? The police would carry out operations as empowered by the Hong Kong laws. And in case of risk, measures would be taken out to mitigate such factors, and these measures must be within the framework of the law. Thank you. Finally, a question from myself. Undersecretary, I've asked this question earlier at LegCo. If certain Hong Kong residents leave Hong Kong to take part in terror attacks, or for Hong Kong nationals who are about to take out terror attacks in Hong Kong after receiving overseas training, is there any way to bar them from entering Hong Kong? If you realize that certain individuals are training for terror attacks online or other channels, can that person be barred from leaving or entering Hong Kong? Thank you. We are introducing an ordinance to meet the requirements of the UN ATMO. Any permanent Hong Kong resident who leaves Hong Kong to receive terrorism training, then there would be a law in place to bar that person from carrying out such activity, and he or she might be prosecuted. If intelligence shows that a person is suspected to take place or receive training or take part in terrorist activities, he or she would be interrogated when entering Hong Kong to see whether he acts in the interest of Hong Kong. If this is a Hong Kong permanent resident, the right of entry would be safeguarded, but within Hong Kong, different law enforcement agencies would be empowered to investigate whether that person takes place in terror activities and whether such activities contravene with our laws. So whether the Immigration Department, Customs and Excise Department, Police, or even ICAC are all empowered to investigate individuals suspected to take part in terrorism, and if there is evidence, they would be handed to the courts. So the legislation is not in place. If we are talking about a Hong Kong permanent resident, if he or she receives training overseas and is about to commence an attack in Hong Kong, can you bar him or her from entering Hong Kong? And can that person be detained for possible prosecution? If it's a Hong Kong permanent resident, he or she would enjoy the right of entry. After that person enters Hong Kong, we would deal with that individual, and the law enforcement agencies would carry out investigations. So it depends on the actual situation whether a prosecution would be taken out, and if so, we would hand over to the courts. Thank you. So that's all for this item. Item 6, any other business? We have no any other business, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much to all who attend.